Theodosia and the Serpents of Chaos, Chapter 4. The name of this chapter is Out of the Frying Pan into the Cat. And there is the artwork that goes with it. It's all very well and good to know that something's cursed, but you still have to work out what on earth to do about it. Father has taught me that when all the clues fail to lead to a solid conclusion, there is research. Piles and piles of it. Of course, Father didn't realize that I'd spend my time studying, or Father didn't realize what I'd spend my time studying, but the fact of the matter was, research was my only defense. When I was very young and first began to visit the museum, it terrified me, even though I was too young to understand why. Now, of course, I knew it was the evil curses and restless spirits I sensed wandering around the place. But all I knew back then was that if my parents learned of my fear, they wouldn't let me come to the museum. Then I'd never get to see them. So I vowed to keep my fears to myself. For years, my parents thought I had a permanent chill. So badly did I shiver whenever I was near the museum. I still don't know why the curses and spirits didn't harm me, although we did go through an astonishing number of junior curators and clerks. Most of them either had unfortunate accidents or took extremely ill. One or two of them appeared to have lost their minds completely. Fortunately, Mother and Father didn't suffer the fate of those other employees. The only reason I could think that Mother was safe was because without her, the artifacts, and therefore the curses and spirits, would stay buried and obscure and never have the chance to wreak their havoc on mankind. It was almost as if by leaving her alone, they were thanking her for releasing them, although, of course, she had no idea what she had done. Father wasn't as lucky. In fact, that's how he injured his leg. He took a nasty tumble down all 3 flights of stairs. Afterward, he said it felt as if someone had just reached out and pushed him. I'm quite sure that someone or something did. Although I do think they went easy on him too, since he was the one who spent all his time restoring the artifacts to their former glory. Of course, I didn't understand any of this until I became old enough to read. Then I began researching everything we had in the museum, hoping that knowledge would replace my fear. It wasn't until I discovered the old, nearly forgotten volumes on ancient Egyptian magic that I began to understand. Once I'd read those, I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and it wasn't reassuring. Luckily, the old texts also listed ways to remove or nullify the curses. Slowly, I began to learn of different antidotes and remedies. There were a few harrowing mistakes along the way, but mostly I'd been very lucky. Since I spent so much time in the museum, I've claimed one of the small offices off the main reading room as my own study. Our reading room is hardly ever used, as most everyone goes to the British Museum to do their research. Father thinks I'm attending to my studies, and I let him believe that. This morning I sat among arcane texts bound in leather and held together with buckles and straps, ancient clay tablets filled with rows and rows of hieroglyphs, and scrolls of parchment and papyrus on which ancient priests and sorcerers made their notations. I finally settled on Hidden Egypt, Magic, Alchemy, and the Occult by T.R. Nectanebus. He seems to have picked up more bits about ancient spells and curses than anyone. I took a bite of my jam sandwich and began to read. The cursed statuettes were often made of basalt, a hard black stone associated with the underworld. Now for the difficult part. I actually had to touch the thing with my bare hands. At least there wasn't any moonlight, and the curse lay quiet and dormant. Slipping off a glove, I reached out and tapped a fingernail against the statue. It was cold, hard stone, and definitely black. In fact, it looked exactly like the picture in the book. I pulled my glove back on and continued reading. Once the statue had been inscribed with the necessary hieroglyphs, it was covered with magic spells and filters designed to transfer their power once the proper awakening agent was applied. This was primarily used for healing, but was occasionally used for evil purposes as well. If the statue was intended to curse instead of heal, the filter most likely contained snake oil, cobra, or asp, which will give the object an exceptionally glossy texture. If cursed, the book said, the object will give off the faint scent of sulfur. Curses did have a particular smell to them, and it wasn't pleasant. I leaned forward and sniffed. It was hard to tell over the aroma of blackberry jam, but I was fairly certain I did detect a whiff of sulfur clinging to the statue's glossy surface. I resumed my reading, straining to make out the faded, spidery handwriting as dark gray clouds moved in and blocked what little light came through the window. To neutralize the curse, make a small replica of the figurine out of wax, 4 fingers width tall. On the bottom of the figure, scratch the indicated hieroglyphs, then make a potion of the following ingredients. Say the indicated spell as you anoint the statuette with the potion. The potion will wake the spell and activate the curse, but the spell you chant will direct it into the small wax figurine, which must then be immediately consigned to flame. It is of critical importance to stay focused on the spell once it has begun. Notice how Nectanebus didn't say what the spell does once it's activated. These ancient scholars always leave out the important stuff. Frankly, I am not fond of surprises, as the ones around here tend to be rather wicked. When mucking about with ancient curses and black magic, I prefer to know just how bad things can get if they go wrong. Not that I'm certain I can fix them, but still, there's comfort in knowing. Just then, Isis, who'd been curled up on the small couch, warily eyeing the statuette, leaped to her feet. She arched her back and hissed at the door. I slammed the book shut and glanced around, trying to find a hiding place for the statue. I snatched it off the desk and ended up shoving it back inside the rolled up papyrus scroll. The door burst open, and Clive Fagenbush strode into the room. "Where is it, you pest?" he asked me. You'd think the man was stalking me. "Where is what?" I asked, taking a bite of jam sandwich, knowing it would disgust him and make him think of me as just a grubby little girl. "The statuette of Bastet. Where is it?" "Are you still going on about that? I told you I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about. Is father looking for it?" "No," Fagenbush said with a snort. "He hasn't even noticed it's missing, but I have. It was an especially interesting artifact, and I have plans for it. Now, where did you put it?" "Whatever would I be doing with a statuette?" I asked, trying to look as innocent as I could. He took 2 long strides into the room until he was towering above me. His eyebrows drew together, forming a thick black V over his eyes. The cabbagey smell that clung to him, mixed with the sulfur fumes given off by the statue, made my eyes water. "Give me that statue." I'd never seen him this furious before. It took every speck of willpower to stand my ground. I would not back away, no matter how hard my knees knocked together. Refusing to let my eyes wander over to the rolled papyrus on the table, I gritted my teeth and stared back. In case you're hard of hearing, I do not have it. Fagenbush drew in a deep breath, and his long nose quivered. "I know you're lying. I want that statue. I want it back where it belongs by sunset. Do you understand? I have plans for that statue." His eyes raked over me, and they do not include interference from a nasty, sticky little girl. He smiled, and it was a chilling smile. But that could change if you don't cooperate, he said meaningfully. Then he stormed across the room, muttering, "The child is a raving lunatic." When he reached the door, he slammed it shut, certain his threat would be enough to force my cooperation. Fagenbush was revolting, but when he was in a rage, he was positively terrifying. Quite frankly, this new side of him scared the stuffing out of me. I went over to the door and locked it. "Idiot," I whispered, mad at myself for letting him rattle me so. I had an overwhelming urge to snuggle with Isis just then, but there wasn't time. I bent down to give her a quick rub under the chin and promised myself a long cuddle with her after I had dealt with the statue. I hauled my carpet bag full of curse removing supplies out from behind the desk and began to rummage around. For any who might be interested in such things, I have made a list of what my kit contains. Recommended supplies and equipment for ancient Egyptian curse removal. Unbleached linen or muslin thread in the following colors: red, green, yellow, white, blue, and black. A mortar and pestle. Loads of wax, preferably white. Sharp-edged stick for carving in wax. Gold and silver wire. Willow wood twigs. Variety of herbs such as catnip and rue, frankincense and myrrh, red wine, honey, milk, lettuce juice extracted from lettuce leaves. They are often hard to find, so I substitute cabbage and then water it down a bit. It seems to work fine. Stones, pebbles, and shells in interesting shapes and sizes. Small fish or chicken bones. Odd bits of natural bric-a-brac such as cat teeth, bits of lizard skin, a good collection of that sort of thing. Small bits of rock and semi-precious stones like quartz, sandstone, lapis lazuli, jasper, malachite, carnelian, turquoise, and alabaster. And there is her list. She kind of reminds me of Hermione from Harry Potter, and Fagenbush kind of reminds me of Snape. Since I am mad about collecting wax bits, there was easily enough to make a small figurine. Once I had formed the replica, which didn't look very much like a cat, but rather more like a slender tree trunk with ears. Hopefully it wouldn't matter. I carved the correct hieroglyphs in the bottom of it and then set it down. I reached back into my bag and pulled out a glass vial, opened it, and sniffed. Claret. I'd had to snitch it from the decanter in Father's library. If he ever noticed it was missing, I would blame it on Fagenbush. Smiling at the thought of this subtle revenge, I groped around until my hand closed around a small muslin pouch. Since so many magical recipes call for the herb rue, I always try to have a supply of it on hand. It's good for warding off evil spirits, and it's useful against the hysterical spasms or afflictions that curses can cause. It's devilishly hard to find. It takes all my pocket money as well. Removing curses is not a task for the faint-hearted or financially strapped. Unfortunately, I am both. I mixed the two ingredients together in a mortar, grinding the rue down fine with the pestle. When it was ready, I took a deep breath and stripped off my gloves. With the stub of a pencil, I drew a wedge-at eye on each of my palms and hoped it would be protection enough. I dipped a clean rag in the potion and began wiping it on the cursed statue. As I chanted the words from the book, I was careful to keep the rag between the statue and my fingertips at all times. In Egyptian magic, in addition to using the right recipe, the words you use and how you use them are critically important for any curse or spell. You must get the words just so and have the proper tone of voice in order for it to work. Or, at least that's what the book said. I knew I was doing that part right because the statue began to vibrate and the scent of sulfur grew stronger. The hieroglyphs that I had seen last night suddenly rose to the surface in a buzzing frenzy. The good news was, wherever I touched the statue with the potion, the symbols shrank back, as if afraid. Surely that was a good sign. When I finally ran out of potion, all the symbols had shrunk to half their original size. I stopped dabbing and stepped back, still chanting. Slowly, the hieroglyphs seemed to try and pull away from the surface of the statue, as if the words I uttered were calling to them. With a series of dull pops, they broke free of the statue and rose up into the air above it, where they hovered like a swarm of angry bees. I held my warded hands out in front. The stench of sulfur was overpowering, and I tried to utter the words of power without breathing in any of the ghastly fumes. Unfortunately, when it came to the phrase, "Begone, you putrid she-cat," Isis protested by swiping at my ankle with her claws. Startled, I looked down at her. "Not you," I said. As I spoke, the buzzing symbols quit hovering and began streaming straight toward my cat. The moment they touched her, she snarled, and every hair on her body stood straight up on end as the hieroglyphs danced along her fur. Isis's eyes grew wild, and her ears flattened against her head. An unholy yowl erupted from her throat. She was no longer my beloved pet, but evil incarnate. Was that what Nectanebus had meant when he said it was critically important to focus and avoid distractions? The curse was supposed to rise off the statue and flow into the wax figurine, which I was then to burn. At least, that's what had happened in the past. But now I had no idea what to do. I didn't dare take my eyes off of Isis long enough to read the book for suggestions. The bespelled cat reached out and swiped me again, this time with all the furies of hell behind her. Her claws sliced through my woolen stockings and bit painfully into my shin. She arched her back and hissed, and then ran to hide under the bookshelf, where she continued to make low, demonic yowls. I collapsed into a chair and stared at the bookshelf, and then turned to look at the sleek statue of Bastet, which now sat as peaceful as you please. What had I just done? Poor Isis! Reverse it. That's what I had to do, reverse it. But it could be undone, couldn't it? Oh dear. And what if that nasty curse had gone into me? My stomach twitched uncomfortably. Best not to think about that. When I was sure I could stand again, I hurried back over to the books spread out on my desk. Surely there must be a way to fix this. Just then the clock began chiming the hour. 2:00. Where had the day gone? It was time to collect Mother. My joy at Mother's homecoming was somewhat dampened by poor Isis's predicament. I would have to work out what to do about Isis later. I closed the book and snatched the neutralized statuette off the table and rolled it up in an old piece of parchment so I could return it to the shelf upstairs. Halfway out of the room, I remembered that Father would probably be hungry. I hurried back to the table and tucked the last of the jam sandwiches into my pocket. After one last apologetic glance in Isis's direction, I headed out the door. I stayed on the lookout for any signs of Fagenbush as I went. Who knows what he would do if he found me with the statue? Probably bash me over the head with it. I finally reached Father's workroom and made my way through upended dinosaur bones, half-open crates, cracked urns, and a headless marble sculpture. After I returned the statuette to its shelf, I went in search of Father. I found him at one of his work tables, trying to reconstruct a piece of clay tablet from Mum's dig that had been in the crate with the Bastet statue. The steel was in 7 different pieces, and it looked like he was having some difficulty. I waited patiently for him to notice me. When that didn't happen, I cleared my throat. "Father, it's time to pick up Mother from the station." "Just as soon as I finish here," he said, sounding as if he hadn't really heard me at all. I looked out the window, where the clouds had finally joined together and formed a steady gray drizzle. "I don't think Mum's going to want to wait that long." When he didn't answer, I looked over his shoulder It appeared he was trying to sort out the hieroglyphs on the pieces of clay tablet. Intrigued, I leaned in closer. I adore hieroglyphs. Some people love to draw, and others have a way with music, and still others love puzzles. But hieroglyphs are my favorite thing. To me, they make clear and perfect sense, the way they were so, as if they were the way they were supposed to communicate. But father seemed stumped. Here you go. I reached around his arm. What if you put this piece here and then turn it clockwise, half a turn? There. Maybe now he'd begin to see how useful I could be. Theodosia, I really don't think you comprehend how complex this is. There is no way a mere child could understand how these pieces, like so, I said, and I slid the last piece into place. He leaned forward to study the completed stele. Well, now, be a good girl and find me a spot of lunch before we go, would you? I already thought of that. I reached into my pocket and placed the jam sandwich on the table in front of him. His face brightened. Oh, jolly good, thank you. He took a bite and then grimaced. Jam? Again? My spirits fell. It was something to eat, wasn't it? Besides, it was all I could find in the cupboard. I glanced at the clock again. Poor mother would be wondering what on earth had happened to us. But father was once again absorbed in the stele. But let them remember to be afraid even after his death, he read, as the clock chimed 2:30. Come on, father. Mother is going to be as furious as a drenched cat. Oh, he said, looking out the window. Is it raining? A loud crack of thunder and bolt of lightning shot out of the sky, and the rain turned into torrents. Just a bit, I said.